View from the Gutters, episode 42. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning: the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode, we discuss Loaded Bible, and to skip ahead to the recommendation section, skip to 2944. Welcome to the show. This is View from the Gutters, episode 42. I'm Andrew Chard.
I'm Matt McGinnis.
I'm Tobias Panchin.
And I'm Cade Reynolds.
And we are talking about Loaded Bible today by Tim Seeley with various artists. I don't know, Toby, you want to read the...
Hold on a second. I gotta find it.
Yeah, I know that Mike Norton's in there.
Mike Norton is in there somewhere. Here we go. Mark Engelert, Mike Norton, Nate Bellingard, Ben Glendenning, and Christopher Johnson.
All right, so yeah, smattering.
Weird name, Christopher Johnson.
Yeah. I think you butchered that one. I think
I really messed that up.
Try that one again.
Embarrassing for all of us.
Yeah, there's a good smattering of different art styles in this book. I think it's, there's a lot of people that worked on it. I don't know. Toby, you pitched this one, right?
I did.
Yeah, do you want to kind of talk about it real quick?
Well, yeah. I mean, I kind of pitched it because it's something that I read a while ago and I've owned for a while. And I didn't realize that it was the same Tim Seeley as did Revival. When we did Revival, it only occurred to me when I was looking on my shelf for something to bring. Mm-hmm. And rereading it, like, it doesn't surprise me that I didn't make the connection because this is very, very different in style than Revival. And I think a lot of the problems that I had with Revival were around the areas where it was trying to be kind of serious and dramatic, and it fell short for me. And that is not an issue with this book.
Right.
Because it is not serious at all. It is ridiculous and over the top.
Maybe not serious for you.
Oh, yeah, maybe. But I
think that's what he writes.
I
best
really
kind of
dig the just kind of like over the top, ridiculous B-moviness of it.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the complaints that we had about Revival, again, is exactly the opposite in this. I think that the color really sells this book.
Oh, yeah.
Like the way that the sky is always like red and purple and just all the crazy colors that are used throughout this book, I think really sell the energy.
Well, and the like futuristicness of it, it's
like post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, it feels you don't have to read too much before you're like, oh, okay, I know what kind of environment this is set in. Like the art does a lot to just kind of place you in a spot right away.
I mean, you kind of have like the semi-serious opening where it's kind of like describing like the world falling into darkness and stuff, and then on the second page, it's like here's Jesus and he's kicking ass and he's killing vampires and he spits in the vampire's mouth and it like bursts into flame, and it's cool.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I also feel like this book was a big departure from Revival in another way, which is it doesn't feel like it was intentionally serialized. Like this kind of. It had more of like, we're going to tell a smaller story. We know where it's going, and we'll kind of like wrap more of it up. That didn't really happen.
Beginning,
with this book.
A middle, and an end.
But with Revival, it feels like it's like, oh, we're going to try to tell a long form story with this book. So, and for me, I tend to like the stuff that is not indefinite, but that has like, oh, we know where we're going with this story. We can arc the story, and you can see the arc because it's a shorter arc,
Yeah.
But I don't know. They're different books, but I think that I've always really liked Tim Seeley's more lighthearted takes. Like I love hack slash, and as a fan of like horror slasher movie stuff, I think that was very like B movie in nature as well.
Yeah, I haven't read Hack Slash, but reading this again reminded me of Dread, which came out I think last year or earlier this year.
Last year.
It was last year.
Yeah, it was like late last year, but it's sort of serious, but it's that tongue-in-cheek kind of serious where it's just like a little bit over the top, and I think that works really well, and I think that makes a really fun story than what you could do with like it's the end of the world. I mean. This is not Left Behind by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
Like it is entirely possible to do like post-apocalyptic, whatever, like Jesus comes back to Earth stuff, and have it be cool, but not have it be fun.
Yeah.
And I think that this has fun with itself.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it's very
Self-aware
and irreverent in a great way. Like it's irreverent for humor's sake, and I think that it works really well. Like I love the idea of Jesus as this like badass vampire killing, slaying machine. Like I think that's I don't know. I think there's a lot of humor just in that idea.
Well, if you look at it through the right lens, Jesus was kind of a superhero.
Yeah.
Of his day. I mean, he had superpowers.
Right.
And he helped people.
Yeah.
Some people actually believe that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and regardless of what, like, I can understand how this book would probably offend a lot of people and they wouldn't want to read it, but at the same time, I think that that's detrimental because I think that this book has fun in a great way. It is a slightly irreverent.
I think that I don't think that this is really disrespectful. Like, I think if you're offended by this, you're looking to be offended, or you're taking things a little bit too seriously.
And there are so many people out there that would just love nothing more than to be offended at the smallest thing. So any kind of thing like that.
But I think that this book really is, in a sense, faithful to the idea of Jesus Christ. Like he is trying to save people the best way that he knows how, and he doesn't always understand what's going on.
And it is. I don't know. Well, you've read this now because you're listening to spoilers, but isn't this the one where he? It comes out later that it might not actually be. Yeah,
well, I mean, they took it's like blood from the Shroud of Turin and stuff.
So it's not.
It's like we don't even know that he is really Jesus or not. He could just be some guy. I mean, he has these powers.
Right.
But they cloned him using super science.
Right.
So we have no idea what he really
the way
is.
that the Bible, is like, oh, he'll come down from the heavens. It's like, no, they made him in a lab. This guy is just a clone superhero. Like, he may not actually be Jesus, but he has the Jesus aesthetic kind of going for him. Yeah, I don't know. I would be careful with who I recommended the book to, I guess, is all I'm saying, because some people are offended. But if you have friends who can handle this kind of irreverent humor, which basically all of my friends.
Well, whenever I think about Christianity, because I'm not a Christian myself, I always think of my buddy Ben, who is an Episcopalian priest now. And I think that he would love this book. I think he'd find it hilarious.
I think there's go ahead, kid.
It does spin Jesus in a positive life. I mean, regardless of or positive light, regardless how you feel, it's fun. It doesn't really say anything bad about him.
Well, yeah, he's not running over hookers with his car or anything in this book. He is still being the savior of mankind.
If you want to have something that's disrespectful of Christianity, there you could find things very easily. Battle Pope, for example, is way more disrespectful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just kind of jumping off that, coming into the book, that's kind of what I thought I was signing up for, which in no way offends me. I mean, I consider myself Christian, but I just don't get hung up on stuff like that. But I actually was really pleasantly surprised by the fact that instead of trying to use this story to say something or insult people, because sometimes you can tell that they're just doing it for shock value. It was obvious that Tim Seeley was just oh, this is a cool idea. This is spinning things that people already know in a little bit different light and having fun with it.
It feels to me like one of those great bar ideas you have where you're out with your friends drinking for a while and you're like, what if? And then you just come up with a crazy story, and Tim Seeley's just I'll write
Let's go with it.
Yeah, and just ran with it to the nth degree. And
well,
I think it works.
It says at the beginning, based on a concept by Tim and Steve Seeley.
Yeah,
I'm assuming that's his brother, probably. And so in my mind, I was thinking, this is something that they came up with when they were kids.
Yeah.
This is an idea he's had in his pocket for years and years and years.
In the back, it actually has a poster. One of them had to create a poster for art class, and they came up with this one of Steve Seeley as Jesus. And
nice. Is that... They Toby and Matt have different editions of the book, so I'm
and there's a ton of
there's tons of extra stuff in the. Oh, is that it? Yeah,
there's lots of extra artwork in the back of the book.
I'm pointing at a page that no one can see. Oh, so glad this is not a video show though.
Oh, okay. There's at the end of the book, which I totally didn't read. There's a short comic, the original short story Written by Tim Seeley, pencils by Steve Kurth, inks by Barbara Schultz. Originally published in Heaven to Hell, issue 1 from Dead Dog Comics. And like it's obviously a lot rougher just looking at it.
Yeah.
It's black and white,
And Jesus has dreadlocks,
which is awesome.
He does look pretty BA, I'll say that.
Yeah.
He's got like some sweet armor and a giant sword.
I have always been a big fan of Tim Seeley's kind of like, homage to genre works that he does. Like I really think that Hack Slash is a great, example of that. And I think this is too. Like it's such a good, you read the title, not Loaded Bible, but the subtitle, the Jesus versus Vampire Gospels, and you basically know what you're getting into right off the cover. I think that Hack Slash is a great example of that too, where it's like, okay, I know what I'm in for.
Yeah.
It's Hack Slash versus Chucky. Okay, cool. Yeah, like I know where this is going. And I think that this does a great job of like setting up your expectations from page 1 and then just like maintaining that. Like it doesn't throw you any crazy, loops. You know what you're getting into, and that's why I think that's why I think it's irreverent in all the right ways, because you know what you're getting into going into it. So if you would be offended by this, you would read the first page and go, this isn't for me. And that's okay. Like you don't have to read the whole book, but I think that people should check it out and take a look through it. I think it's really fun. And it's cool to see how far Tim Seeley's come too as far as writing goes.
Yeah,
like, I always love following creators throughout their career.
It's kind of weird to me because like I had all these issues with Revival, and I don't have any of those problems with this book, and I'm not sure if it's like the non-serious tone or what he's trying to do in Revival. Like I'm not sure what my hang up with it was, but like I was kind of like on the fence with this when I first bought it. I was like, that's okay, but it's not great. And rereading it, I was like, I don't know what I was thinking. This is awesome.
Yeah, I think that we talked about this on Revival, but one of the main problems with Revival is it's not polished as a product, where this feels like, it feels complete. Like it feels really well done. Like Revival was lacking what I think it should have had better colors. I think the art could have been a little tighter because of the colors. Like it could have helped a lot. I think that the pacing in the story could have been changed. And the fact that we only read the first trade of like a 2.5 trade story that's been going on, kind of gives us an unfair look at it as well. But with Loaded Bible, this is it. This is everything there is. You get this. It's very polished. I think the art looks great in this book. I love the colors. Like Toby said, it sets the tone really well. So.
Yeah, I mean, I walked away from Revival going, I don't know how I feel about Tim Seeley. I may not read anything else of his.
Yeah.
And having gone back and read this, I'm like, okay, well, that was an aberration. I think I like Tim Seeley as a writer. I think he does cool stuff, and now I'm interested to see more by him.
Yeah,
I think part of it too is Tim Seeley's been writing stuff like this, this being Loaded Bible and Hack Slash, things like that, for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm no expert of Tim Seeley, but as far as I understand, Revival is kind of one of his first major kind of forays into that style of story.
It's an emerging style in comics.
And so I think that this is a perfect example of him writing something maybe he's a little bit more comfortable with.
Yeah.
And that he's had a little bit more time with. And so I think that this style of story fits his strengths more right now. Not to say that down the road, maybe, things more like Revival, he'll be just fine, and we might not have the same
from what
issues,
I hear with Revival is like the longer that he's on the book and the more issues come out, like the better that he gets and the better the story gets. So
yeah,
hey, that's great.
But yeah, he wrote Hack Slash for a really long time, and although it has like some lulls in the art and some story like pacing stuff at some points, like I think that book is great. And if you like this book, and if you liked Revival, and you like 80s 90s slasher movies, you should definitely pick up Hack Slash. It's a lot of fun. So, and there's lots of good places to jump on because there's lots of little like mini series, and then there's like 2 ongoing series that you could jump into either one. So, and a flashback, My First Maniac. So there's tons of great stuff with Hack Slash. So if you like this book and you liked Revival, I think you should definitely check out his other work, because I that was what I read first, was Hack Slash, and I really enjoyed it. So, Kate, is there anything you wanted to?
Not really. Well, yes. I was thinking about it. Okay, so I'm kind of with Matt here. I'm not Christian per se, but I do believe in God, or I hope that God exists. There's a lot of connotations with saying I believe in God. But I did have a crisis of faith when I was reading comic books, and I started looking at things differently. And I think that I actually became more spiritual when I started thinking about Jesus as a superhero. And for me, it kind of solidified religion in that at the end of the day, I don't think it matters why you believe in what you believe or what you believe in general. Just like, for me, this is the kind of thing that got me more spiritual, was thinking, well, what if this did happen? Like, there's no proof that it did, or there's no proof that it didn't. So
I think that one thing that we talk about a lot, superheroes a lot, is regardless of their power, like what makes them a superhero, and that is to be able to do heroic things and be there to help people when it's important. And if you look back at like early Christianity and the teachings of Jesus, I think that's something that you can really take away from that, regardless of whether you're a big believer or if you're just like interested in what's going on there, is the message is a good message of you help people that need help.
Exactly.
You go out of your way to help people that need help, and that's I think that's a heroic message.
Definitely.
So I think
Absolutely.
that's something about this as a follow up to that, as possibly irreverent as it is this is Jesus as a superhero, and that's a kind of a continuation and maybe an expanding on the idea of him as like this great, person who is there to help people. So,
and I guess for me, the thing is that if somebody who's having a crisis of faith reads this and they're like, oh, maybe Jesus was a badass. And if that restores any sort of faith to them, I'm not saying that they have to have faith, but if it does, and if it makes, even one person's life better, I think that's worth it.
Well, yeah, and
I think it's good that you can be somebody like me and not really take a message away from this and still enjoy it as a fun story. Or if you're somebody like Kate and you really want to derive a message from it, there is a good message there for you to find.
Yeah, I think that he's a good representation of a Jesus figure, heroic Jesus figure in the book. And
my whole point is that at the end of the day, I don't think it matters, what you believe. It's that if you want to, if it helps you get through the day thinking, well, maybe Jesus was a superhero.
Yeah.
Or, maybe Jesus was a deity. It really doesn't matter at all.
The message is the important, what you take away from that is like, what his actions did, regardless of whether you think they're, the power of God or magic or superpowers or what, is that it was a message of like acceptance and helping people.
Well,
exactly.
We just talked about Thor, God of Thunder. Thor is a superhero and he is a deity.
Right.
And I think that people make a mistake by creating an aura of excessive reverence around certain ideas and certain characters. And I don't want to insult anybody here, but in Islam, like, you're not allowed to depict Muhammad at all. Like, it's not allowed. And I understand why that is from a religious perspective, but I think it may be a little bit overboard. I think things like this are good because they allow you to take these characters that have great significance and take them off the shelf and play with them and make them real and interesting to people.
Yeah.
And that they can then take that as a chain to find something more meaningful for themselves.
Well,
rather than saying like, this is this thing that's kind of off in space and you're not allowed to touch it or interact with it. And you just have to look at it.
Yeah. And not to get to actually go into any weird religious area or anything like that. But I grew up going to church every Sunday. I've read the Bible cover to cover more than once. A lot of people don't think about the fact that if you were Christian and if you believe that, we were made in God's image. And so for us to have a sense of humor, that means that God had to have a sense of humor. For us to be angry.
Look at the platypus.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
I dare you to tell me
that's God's joke right there. I mean, but, Jesus had a sense of humor. If you read the Bible, he had a sense of humor. And I'm not saying that I'm not going to try to say that I know what Jesus would think was funny if he was real.
Yeah.
But, this, I think, is the sort of thing where, I mean, it's okay to have a little bit of fun with things.
Yeah.
As long as you do it from the right place. And that's what I love about this book, is there's no point where he's saying God is stupid, Jesus is, Jesus is a farce, anything like that. He's not trying to point out anything like that. He's just saying, hey, here's a concept, here's someone everybody knows.
Right.
What if things were a little bit different than what we think?
The one point that he is making, I think, though, is that human organized religions are fallible, because probably one of the biggest villains in this book are the Council of Bishops.
Yep.
Like, they make terrible, terrible mistakes.
Well, and it is that argument of, like, God is infallible, humans are fallible.
Exactly.
Argument over
which
again,
which
like,
is a common theme throughout all religion.
History, it's been proven that, like, whether or not you believe in the work or the word, in the Bible, like, the Bible itself isn't dangerous. It's just a book. It's what people do in the name of written word.
Yeah,
that
it's
is
the same
what's
thing
dangerous.
with the Quran.
Like,
It's the same thing with the
Torah. Yeah. You have, you have the Crusades, essentially, 6 wars based on the fact that, like, oh, the Holy Land should be our home, not anyone else's. Let's go fight them for it. And it's, it's done in the name of a book that is harmless on the surface, but can be real dangerous. And I think that the Council of Bishops are, like, a great allegory for religious corruption, corrupting the text.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that the book, and again, it's Jesus isn't doing anything, like, this isn't, horrible Jesus sleeping with hookers and running over grandmas with a car. Like, he's a hero in this book. Like,
absolutely.
He makes great decisions, like, whether the Council of Bishops fucks up or not.
One of the things that was important for me was that he makes mistakes. It's a learning process. And, I mean, at the end of the day, I have to believe that, Jesus made mistakes. I mean,
and had doubt, because that's very clear in the Gospels. It's like he wasn't sure exactly what was going to happen. He didn't know the outcome, but he just, like, trusted in God that it would work out. And so I feel like in this book he has a lot of doubt, and that really plays into that character as well. As he's, like, not sure if who he should follow, what he should be doing. I think the character is, like, really well-rounded character in this book, because you think you know Jesus so well because he's a huge cultural icon, but when you read the book, it's like, oh, there's depth there. Like, I can dive into this. And I think that's what Toby was saying. Like, it's important sometimes to take these untouchable characters, pull them down off the shelf, mull them around a little bit and make them accessible.
Yeah, I mean, and things like this, I mean, it brings it into the collective conscience of people. You
Yeah.
know? Even if it was written from a place of malice and it was supposed to point out all these, things, so maybe someone reads and that's not what they take away from it. As long as I mean, it all just, like we've said a couple times now, it all just depends on how you personally take away from it. And the great thing about this book is it's written in such a fashion that you can take away nothing from it and be like, oh, it was a fun story.
Yeah.
Or you can take something from it and be like, oh, this is interesting. I'm going to think about
Jesus
this
is a
more.
badass.
Yeah.
So
that's the dog under the table again. Sorry, guys. No, I totally agree with you guys. And I think that, I'm losing my train of thought. Don't remember what you were talking about. I'm sorry.
That can be a good story. Like, it can have meaning or not, depending on whether you want to look for it.
So the idea that's come up a lot of times, like when it comes to art and fiction, is that the work isn't complete until it's passed through the hands of, like, a reader or a viewer has seen it. So, like, the author is only part of the job, and this isn't, this is up for debate. There are a lot of people that don't believe that believe that the work is the work, and whatever the audience says, they can go fuck themselves. But this, I think that having people read it and discuss it is the completion of the work. So I think that it's important that even if you think that you slightly might be offended by this, that it's still important for you to read it and then have discussion about it. Like, I think that's what takes the work to the next level.
I think that all art is interpretive.
Yeah.
The work doesn't exist isolated by itself, like in the book. It exists when you perceive it and when you interpret it for yourself.
Well, it's the argument of like, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around, does anyone hear it? Like, if you paint a masterpiece and no one ever sees it, like, is it still a work of art? Like,
right.
Where does that?
Where's that line?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of different opinions on that, obviously, but I think that this, especially what we do on this show is talk about what we gleaned from the book. And like a lot of our episodes, when we have 4 people on the show with 10 different opinions about the book, is because like there's a lot to discuss and stuff like this. And I don't know, I think that Matt's totally on point, where it's like you can take stuff away from this, or you can just have a great ride and watch Jesus kill some vampires in a fucking awesome way. Like, the art is great. One of my favorite things is it's so cinematic and the action flows so well that I just, from right at the beginning of the book, you can tell where the action is going, and it's easy to follow and fun.
I actually wanted to throw out that I really love the character designs in this book.
Yeah.
And in particular, I really like Sistine Celestia. Like, I like her name. I like her character design. Like, I just think she's a cool character. I really enjoyed reading about her.
Yeah, and
not just because she gets naked randomly.
Yeah, I also think that this book has like a great world design too, where it's like we've seen lots of post-apocalyptic stuff, but this one was a very interesting take on that, and I think the art does a lot in
I think the art really sells this book.
Yeah. I think it's just so polished. Like, I really think that they spent time on it, and there's like a lot of care went into it.
I mean, it definitely seems like, and we kind of touched on this, it seems like an idea that has been flushed out before, the actual pen ever hit the paper. Like, it had been mulled around and probably discussed more than once.
And it feels like everybody that worked on the book had a lot of reverence for it and was excited to be working on it, because the quality of their work is so high in this.
Exactly, yeah.
So... yeah, I think it makes the book like a great package. So
yeah, and I mean, it never got finished. I mean, it's kind of to be continued when the volume ends. But I think that the story you get within that package is really good. Like, if you're not necessarily on board for like something that's really long or continuing series or whatever, like, you can buy this one volume. It's complete in what you get for the series, and it's like you can read it and you're done, and it goes on your bookshelf.
Yeah,
and it's the mark of a good book that it can kind of end, and you're like, oh, okay, all right, that was good. But if more came out that was to that quality, to that standard, I mean, like, I would love to read a second volume of it. If it ever came out.
Yeah, and
but if it didn't,
with Tim Seeley being kind of an independent creator and working at places like Image, I think there's always a possibility that he could go back to something like this. So
yeah, absolutely.
And I hope that he does at some point, because I think
that would be cool.
I think the story is like, there's a lot untapped there, and I think that it's a cool universe that he kind of created. So I'd like to see more.
Yeah, I agree.
Which I think is, again, a mark of a good book, when you want more as opposed to less. There's been a lot of books where, I wish it wasn't long as this, because it's bad. But no, this book is, I have a lot of fun reading this. I read this when I first was getting back into comics, and this was kind of like one of my first forays out of superhero comics at the time. And I was like, oh, this is, it is still kind of a superhero book, but I'm, reading indie type stuff for the first time. So I think it's a good transitional book too.
Yeah, it's a good gateway book for the right person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely think it would be a good book to get the right person into comics.
I can see that too.
And because of the way that the cinematic action works and how polished the art is and how easy it is to follow, like, this could be a great first comic for people, And it's so different than anything you'd ever see on television, because no network would
ever
take the chance on something like this.
No.
I think it's cool to show people like what the comics medium is capable of, and that it's not just Superman and Batman, that there's other stuff there. And I think this is like a major strength of comics, that there's so much freedom that someone can make a book that other mediums probably wouldn't touch.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think it's one of the great strengths of comics, and indie comics specifically. So
awesome.
Anything else anybody wanted to add?
No,
all right,
I think that does it.
Let's go ahead and move on to recommendations then. Matt, do you want to start?
Sure. So I brought Todd, the Ugliest Kid on Earth.
Ooh.
It is a book that came out in 4 single issues, probably about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, the trade just came out 2 months ago?
A couple months ago. And trying to see who. It is by Perker Christensen. And by the art is MK Perker. It's basically about, there's a kid named Todd. He has a bag over his head because he's apparently horrifyingly ugly. And he mistakenly gets thrown in prison because there's a serial killer on the loose.
And an inept police.
And a really horrible
police detective. I don't know. Is he a detective or
yeah.
He's not the chief?
Yeah. And basically through his comedy of errors, he ends up in prison. And it's just
like adult prison.
Yeah.
And he's like 8.
Yeah, he's like 8 or he's like 8 or 9. And I mean, basically, this book is it's ridiculous and funny and
super weird.
It's pretty weird. Yeah, I mean, you'll laugh out loud multiple times reading this. Like, there's a part where he's in the prison yard and just like horrible stuff's happening, and he's like chasing around a butterfly. Yeah, and like all around him,
everybody's
just, like,
getting shanked.
People
and,
are getting like
shot.
killed and stuff.
It's super bizarre. It's a good juxtaposition of like this little innocent kid that's just ugly and stupid.
Yeah.
And all of these like horrendous criminals that he spends his time with, and the serial killer that like this inept police like detective cannot catch.
Yeah.
When he easily should have.
Yeah.
Several times.
I read it when it was coming out in single issues, and the trade came out, and I've started reading it again, and it's actually been just as much fun the second time reading it. It was put out by Image. It's a 4-issue series, so it's short. It's a quick read, and actually it did so well. It was originally just going to be the 4-issue miniseries. They've started it's going to be ongoing now, and so they've started a new story arc. So, which is really good as well.
Yeah, Sam just handed this to me when I went into the shop one day to read books, and he was like, "Just read it. It's weird. You'll like it." And I don't know that I love it, but I know that it's weird and no one else is doing anything like it. So it's definitely worth like a look over.
Yeah,
and if you think that you can find some humor in the fact that there's like horrific things happening and a serial killer that's brutally murdering children and a little 8-year-old that gets sent to prison, if you can find some humor in that, I think this book is for you.
So I picked up the book that I was going to pitch, and Cade leaned over and whispered to me, "You should pitch the other one." So real quick, I'm going to put it to you guys. This is what I was going to pitch. This is the other thing that I brought. Which of the things should I
point so that our audience can't see?
Matt?
Oh, really?
All right, fine. So I'm not going to pitch the thing I was going to pitch, and instead I'm going to pitch Kingdom Come by those guys, Mark Waid and Alex Ross.
Those guys.
Those
hacks.
That's right.
It took me a minute. I had to remember. So if you're not familiar with Kingdom Come, on one of our previous episodes we did Earth X. Actually, in 2 of our previous episodes we did Earth X.
Yeah.
But Earth X was directly inspired by Kingdom Come, which was, at the time that it came out in the late 90s, kind of the future of the DC universe. It's set like
Elseworlds.
Yeah, it's an Elseworlds. It's set like 20 years after the current day, when like kind of everything has gone off the rails. Superman is retired. Batman's gotten old. Like all of the heroes of our time have been replaced with kind of the next generation of heroes, and they're like super violent and don't really care about defending people. They just want to fight each other for territory and stuff. And it's very much a commentary on 90s comic books.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's also sort of a meta commentary on the kind of what superheroes are and the nature of the DC universe, in the same way that Earth X is kind of a meditation on what the Marvel universe is.
Yeah, and Marvel's is the book that gets drawn a lot of parallels to this as well, but I feel like the parallels between this and Earth X are a lot stronger.
I would agree with that.
Basically the same idea in both universes.
So kind of the gist of the story is Superman and the original Justice League and a lot of those older heroes come back to kind of say, like, you guys have been fucking up, we need to save the world.
Right.
And it's kind of them coming back and taking charge and making a commentary on what does it mean to be a superhero.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting story. I think it's a really important work for understanding both the DC universe specifically and the evolution of superhero comics in general.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a great story too.
Well, that's the dog again. I'm gonna leak that we are doing a big DC-centric episode coming up in the future. That's gonna, I'm not gonna say too much about it.
But in like a couple of months.
Yeah, we're planning a little thing where we talk about not the New 52, but the older DC that we grew up reading, and so kind of as reference to that. And I think that this book is something that, if you're gonna talk about DC at all, if you're gonna be a fan of DC, this is a must-read.
Absolutely.
And Mark Waid is a fan-fucking-tastic writer, and he knocks it out of the park in this book. And Alex Ross's art is beautiful and also terrible, but...
Yeah, I mean, we talked on the Marvels episode about how Alex Ross's artwork can fall really flat.
Yeah.
And I don't think that happens in this comic. I think this is Alex Ross at his best.
So, yeah, it's all fully painted art, and so I think that... And there's also just huge editions of this where you can get it, the pages at like real big size and see the Alex Ross art really well. And I think that's cool because the art was painted originally at a much larger size. So
yeah, no, this is definitely this is a critical work.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that the DC universe really benefited from a book like this, and as an Elseworlds, it's been folded into continuity later, but as an Elseworlds, I think it works so well, and I think that this is the reason why comic book universes need to have Elseworlds and what if stories, is sometimes there's just stuff you can't tell in the mainstream continuity, and you need a place like this to kind of vent your feelings about your universe and other comic book stuff that was happening. So I think this is a great commentary on 90s comics.
Absolutely.
Cool. What'd you bring, Kate?
Okay, so I am usually one of the first people to harp on Garth Ennis. That's usually said by everybody anytime a Garth Ennis book is pitched. But and we always say there is one thing he does well, and that is war stories. The book that I brought is Enemy Ace War in Heaven, written by Garth Ennis, art by Chris Weston, Russ Heath, Christian Alame, and then Matt Hollingsworth does the colors. Enemy Ace was created by Bob Kanigher and Joe Kubert. So this is Garth Ennis taking somebody else's characters and writing a war story. And it's very good. It's about this pilot from World War I who is now old and retired, and the Third Reich brings him in to fight for Germany, or against Germany.
No. If it's the Third Reich, he would be fighting for the Nazis.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I got confused for a second. I'm also remembering another story like this because I like fighter pilot stories.
Okay.
Yeah, my favorite PlayStation games were always those pilot ones. So this is, I think it's pretty good. I mean, it's definitely got some issues, but it's a solid story, I think. And so I think it'd be cool to talk about it. But yeah, Garth Ennis writing a war story.
Doing what he does best.
Yeah, it's this is a really fun one. I don't know if fun is the right word, but I enjoyed reading it. So
yeah,
it looks really interesting.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, I don't know if fun's the right word. But
and that was put out by DC, correct? It's a DC.
Yeah, it's a DC book from 2001.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. What do you got, Jared?
I brought a book that I believe originally was a webcomic that is quite a strange book. It's called God Hates Astronauts, and I'm not really sure where the title comes from because the book's about superheroes, and it's really bizarre.
Maybe because a lot of superheroes got their powers from like going to space.
Maybe.
I don't know.
The main superhero is like Star Guy. I don't know. He's like Starman, Star something. He's not Starman. He's He's got stars on him. I don't remember what his name is. Captain Stars. Starfighter.
Great pitch.
Starfighter. Okay, so Starfighter, he is fighting this battle with a guy who has trained a bunch of he has like a bear army that he's trained to fight against these superheroes, and he's like this old school,
I already want to vote for that book. Just stop the pitch now.
I can't describe this book without telling you a lot about it, but it's really bizarre. Anyway, he's like this 1800s style bare knuckle brawler who's got the pencil mustache.
You mean the handlebar mustache?
Well, yeah, it's like
the one that curls up,
it
like
curls
a barber
up,
shop,
like a Portland mustache. Like if
Yeah.
you lived in Portland, you probably have this mustache. So
I've had that mustache.
so he's got the curled up mustache, and he's like a bare knuckle brawler who's trained these bears to fight against this superhero group, and the superhero group comes in to stop him from his evil bear plan, and like is fighting bears, and the main superhero Starfighter gets the absolute shit beat out of him by this bare knuckle brawler guy who is just repeatedly punching him in the face till he's basically powderized Starfighter's skull. But Starfighter has a healing factor, so he should be fine. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like Wolverine's, and instead of his like skull reforming properly, he gets this huge like disformed head that is like a big,
that is
really
awful.
fucked up looking bulbous head, and he and
Dated a girl like that once.
yeah and
He looks like MODOK had a baby with bubblegum.
yeah he looks absolutely terrible. But this is the kind of thing that this book is about, is like it takes a thing that could happen to a superhero, and in most comic books it would be like, oh, but he's a superhero, so that doesn't have any lasting consequences, and just stretches it out as far as it can possibly go. And if you read it, you'll see, but that head evolves into other types of heads and stuff, and it gets stretched out. But basically, it revolves around him having marital problems with his wife, who now doesn't want to sleep with him because he's got a really fucked up giant head. And so she goes and like cheats on him, and there's all this like really horrible shit going on, and it's like super bizarre. It's really funny. It's weird. There's a cat that's a lawyer later. His doctor is a rhinoceros. Like it's just
Yes,
it's
Like a
everything
human
that I love
rhinoceros
in-
or rhinoceros?
He's like a humanized rhinoceros. It's like,
Okay.
it's not the doctor. I'm sorry. He's like the head of their criminal, or their crime fighting thing.
Okay.
He's like the guy that they answer to. But yeah, all the lawyers are really weird. There's like
It's got like anthropomorphic people in
there's
it.
like a disembodied a cow spirit head that floats around. Eventually they like the bears that he trained earlier become like bear necromancers and like use magic and stuff. So the book is just nuts. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know that I love it, but I do know that it's funny, and it's something that I think is worth reading. And it reminds me of stuff like The Tick and Venture Brothers and universes like that where stuff like it reminds me of like Tiny Attorney from Venture Brothers, and there's like a cat attorney later that helps him file divorce papers against his
Harvey
wife.
Birdman.
So yeah, it just reminds me of that like weird superhero-y stuff that you don't really see in mainstream comics and can be funny and just real bizarre. So,
Gotcha.
I think there's more coming. It's a to be continued at the end, so I hope there's another trade coming out. But this trade just came out a couple months ago, maybe a month ago. So
Okay.
yeah, go pick it up. God Hates Astronauts. It's weird,
Cool.
but I like it. All right, Matt, what do you want to read?
God Hates Astronauts.
I'm going to vote for Enemy Ace.
All right.
Kingdom Come.
I also am going to vote for Kingdom Come. I think that everybody should read God Hates Astronauts, but I think we really need to talk about Kingdom Come on the show. It's pretty,
Yeah, I mean,
recommended a
pretty
few
pivotal
times.
I've
book,
been
and-
thinking since we did Earth X that we kind of had to close that loop, and I've just been
Yeah.
waiting for the right moment.
Yeah, it's been recommended a couple times, and I think that it's just like it's a book we need to get to eventually. So, yep, I'm going Kingdom Come on this one.
All right.
And-
Then for next week, read Kingdom Come.
All right, and thanks everybody for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.